Now we're going to talk about file input and output. So we've learned how to input data from the user and output it to the screen. But what if we don't want to interact with the user directly? What if we want to use some files that we have somewhere on our computer? Or what if we run the code somewhere else and there are some files there that we want to use? And we want to be able to access these files. We want to be able to write to them. We want to be able to read data from them. And we just generally want to interact with files on our computer. And so that's what we're going to go through now, how to interact with files on our computer. And I'll just write down the general form first, how to open files, and then we'll go through some practical examples. So the general form first is that you generally have a variable name. So we'll just call it file. And what you make this variable equal to is, so you save the file in the variable, and you type in the keyword open, and you can see my coding environment colors it, which means it's a keyword, and you do open and closed braces behind, and then you put in the file name in quotation marks, and then you can put in a comma here, and then you can put in what you want to do. And what you can do here is you can either do a read, so that you read the file. You can either you can do a write, so that you write to the file, or you can do an append, that you append to the file. Now, if you want to be able to read and write at the same time, you can also type in R+, and this would let you read and write the file at the same time. But let's just leave it as read for now, and I'll put the other options here behind it so that we can see it later. And so the options are read, write, append, and R+, which is read and write. Okay. And so the format is like follows. We have our file name or our variable name that we want to store the file in, or the path, and we make it equal to, and then we use the keyword open, and this allows us to open the file, and then we put in the file name, and then we put in a comma, or so a separator, to indicate that we're going to have our second value here, and then we indicate what we want to do to the file. And then it's important, after we're done using the file, is that we close it. So we do that by doing file, and then to indicate that we want to do something to it, we put a dot, and then we do close and open and close parentheses. And so once you're done using the file, it's very important to close it to make sure that there is nothing going wrong, so that the file is closed correctly, and everything is completed. Otherwise, there could be some errors that may occur otherwise with the file. So it's always important. I mean, it may not be as bad if you forget, but it's generally good practice to always remember to close your files at the end. So we'll just comment this out, and we'll leave this up here for reference. And then maybe let's directly go into an example. So what we want to do is we're going to make a list of countries, and we want to write these countries into a file. And then we're going to read the file later. But first, let's just make our list of countries. So we'll call this list of countries, and we'll save it in the variable countries. And we'll make it equal to, and then a list. And, well, actually, let's make these vacation places. So we'll have some nice vacation cities. And maybe we can just change these to cities rather than countries. And so our first nice city would, for example, be London. And then we put a comma to indicate we're going to have the next element of our list. Then we do Paris, and another comma to indicate we're going to do a next element. Then maybe New York, and then another comma for a fourth element. Maybe we want to go to Utah for some nice skiing, and then another comma for the next element. Or maybe we also want to go to Iceland. Whoops. So, well, that's not really a city either, so call it vacation spots and leave it general. So right now we've created our list of vacation spots. That may be nice. And yeah, we just want to write this to a file. So how do we do that? Well, let's open our file and let's call it, or let's save it in the variable vacation file, and we're going to make it equal to. So our variable is called vacation file. We're going to make it equal to, and then we're going to open. Use the open keyword and open and close parentheses, and the file name we'll just call vacation places, and then we close the quotation marks, we put a comma, and we are going to write this file. And now, even if this file doesn't exist on my computer yet, if I make a write function, that means if the file isn't there, it will create it automatically. And it's also important to note that if you use the write function, then if the file is already there, it's going to overwrite everything in it. So it's going to start writing from the top, and if your file is already there, it's going to overwrite what's already inside and replace it with new stuff. So this is good and bad. You know, it could cause you some trouble if you don't pay attention to this. But you know, it's a nice function, especially that it would just create the file for you, so that you don't have to worry about it and going into the folder first and creating it. It does it for you all automatically. And the place this file is going to be created is just in the place where your Python interpreter is in, or your coding environment is in. So it would create the file in the same directory, or in the same folder. Okay, so now we've opened a file for writing, which we've indicated by the W keyword in the second place, and our file is going to be called vacation places. So let's write something to it. Let's loop through our vacation spots and let's write them to our file. So we're going to make a for loop and say for spots in vacation spots. So we're going to go through vacation spots one by one, and each element is going to be saved in this temporary variable here. And what we want to do is we want to write to the file. So we want to do something to it, so we're going to take our vacation file, and to indicate that we want to do something to it, we're going to put our dots here. And what we're going to do is we're going to write to it. And now we need to put in here what we want to write. So what we want to write to it is we want to write the spots. And now it's important to note that whatever you have in here, it must be a string. So you can't put integers in here or something that will give you an error. It has to be a string. And in this case, we're lucky. So we've got a string here. These are actually all strings or words. But when you write, you have to make sure that it's a string. And if it's not a string, you can just easily convert it using the str keyword, like here. And this would convert whatever is inside here to a string. But we don't need to do that right now because it's already a string. But you know, this is also kind of important to note. So yeah, we'll just take our vacation file and we'll write the spots to it. And then yeah, let's just print done at the end. And let's just run our code and see what happens. So we run our code, and we only get the output done because we told that our program says that we want to print done at the end. But we actually don't see anything here. Well, that's because we're writing to a file, and so there isn't really anything to see. But let's just try and see if it actually worked. So let's try to read our file now. And so what we're going to do is first we're going to close this file, and then we're going to read, and then we'll go once we read and once we see the output, then we'll go through everything in detail, and then we're going to understand what happened. So first let's close our vacation file. Okay, so now we closed it, and now we want to reopen this vacation places, but instead of writing, we want to now read it. So we're going to do, and we're going to just save it in the same variable, and we'll create vacation file again, and this time we're going to open our vacation places, and we're going to use the keyword R, so we want to read. So what we've done up here is we've opened our vacation places as a writing file, and we saved it in the vacation file, and then we wrote to the file all of our spots in here, and then we closed the file, and then we're opening the same file, but this time we're opening it in reading mode, and we're also saving it in vacation file. Now you can use different names here. That doesn't really make a difference, but we'll just use the same name, just because it's accurate. It is our vacation file. And what we want to do first is let's just read the whole file and let's save it in a variable name, or in a variable. So we'll call the variable the whole file, and what we're going to do is we're going to read our whole vacation file. So we're going to go vacation file, and we're going to do something to it. So we're going to put a dot, and what we want to do is we want to read it. And then let's just print the whole file. So we want to print everything that we read. And then we can run our code. So what does this read exactly do? Well, this read goes through this whole file, and it reads all of it, and it saves it all in this variable. Now this is okay right now because our file isn't very big. It only contains five names here, or 5 elements. But this could be a problem later if you have huge gigabyte-sized files, and if you read the whole thing, and you try to save that in a variable, that could cause some problems with memory. But we'll also figure out ways how to get around that later. But right now, the read is fine. So let's just run it and see, and then let's really go through it. So we've gotten our output. It looks a bit jumbled, but we'll go through that in a second too. Yeah, but let's just start at the top here. So we've created our list, and our list has 5 elements, and they're nice vacation spots. So we've got London, Paris, New York, Utah, and Iceland. The next thing we do is we create a variable called vacation file, and in this variable, we save the value, or we save the a file place. So what we save is, and we open a file, and we open the file vacation places, and we open it as writing, and this is now saved in vacation file. And then we make a for loop, and we create, or we use the temporary variable spots, and we go through the vacation spots element by element, and each time we have one of these elements, we write it to the file. So for example, spots would start as London, and then we would write London to our file, and then spots would take on the value Paris, and we would write Paris to our file, and then New York, and then Utah, and then Iceland. And then we close our file. And then we open a new file, and well, we save it in the same variable, but it doesn't have to be the same variable name. We could use something different. And so we open our file then, but now we open our vacation places as a reading file, and then we read the whole file here, and we save it in the whole file, and then we print the whole file. And now something that would also be good to do at the end is to close our vacation file. Vacation file.close. So as you can see before, I left out the .close, and nothing happened. I was still able to read, and my computer still works, and there was no crash, or I didn't get an error message that my file has been compromised. So it's okay, and it happens a lot if you forget the .close. But just to be sure, it's always good practice to close the file once you're done using it. Okay, so let's get to the output. So we read the whole file, and we saved it in the variable called the whole file, and we printed it. And what we see is we see London, Paris, New York, Utah, and Iceland, but it's all grouped together and everything. Well, the reason that is like that is because when we write to a file, we literally just write the string in, and we don't put anything extra in there. We don't put any spaces, we don't put any formatting, and that's because that wouldn't be really helpful to us. If we write to a file, and then it puts in extra spaces or extra new lines, and we don't want those in there, then that wouldn't be nice for us. Then we would need to try to get rid of those somehow. So what if we do want everything grouped together? And so that's how the writing goes. It really just, it writes it, and then it has a pointer to, or it points to the place where it last wrote, and then when it has more to write, it would just continue on from there, and it's not going to move to the right or to the left unless we tell it to, but it's just going to continue to write and write and write from the place where it stopped. So how could we fix that? Well, here, for example, we could just add a space. So we write spots, and we join to spots the string, and here I just put an empty space. And now if we run this again, we see now we have London, Paris, New York, Utah, and Iceland, and they're all separated by a space. And I could also put a comma here, for example, and there would be commas in between. And you'll notice here that there's a comma in the end here too. So that's one of the things that you should also kind of be aware of when you're writing that. It's going to write after everything, and there are ways to get around that too. So don't worry about that. But yeah, so these are just kind of nice formatting things that you can do. You can also add new lines like we've seen before. So to make a new line, we have the / character, which indicates that the next character is going to have a special function. And in this case, the n after the / indicates a new line. So if you run it like this, now we're going to get them all on new lines. So we've got London, Paris, New York, Utah, and Iceland, all on separate lines. So yeah, cool. That's really nice. Well, this read thing, like I mentioned before, can be a little bit problematic, because if our files are really big, then we have to save that all in one place. So if we have a 2.8 gigabyte text file or something, and we read the whole thing, that's a lot of data to save. So maybe it'd be better if we read the files line by line. So let's see how we can do that. So let's comment this out, and let's instead read the file line by line. So there are different ways that we can do that, but we'll just start with a for loop, because for loops are really nice. And so what we can do is we can write a for loop. So we start with a keyword for, and then we use a temporary variable, and this one's going to be called line because it's going to be a line in the file. And we do for line in vacation file. So we're going to go through the vacation file line by line. So this is what that does. If we do a for loop in a file that we're reading, we're actually going to go through it line by line. So if we do a for loop in a list, we go through it element by element. And if we do a for loop through a file, we go through the file line by line. And line is just going to be, or is just going to take on the value of the whole line. So it's going to have all the data from the one line in it. And so what we can do here, for example, is we can just print the line. Yeah, and let's just run it, and let's just see what we get. So we see we still get London, Paris, New York, Utah, and Iceland. What we also see is that there is an extra new line here. And now where that comes from is we've added a new line here through our \n, which creates the new line, which is what we see after here. And the print function automatically adds a new line. And so that's where the other one comes from. And now we can change that. For example, we can change the print function by, for example, adding or telling the print function what we want the separation to be. So to get rid of adding the new line after the print, what we can do is we can put a comma after what we want to print, and then we type in the keyword end, and we make it equal to, and then we put in quotation marks, and in these quotation marks, we put in whatever we want the end of the printing to be. So usually it's a new line, so that's why we see the new line here. But if we leave it empty, for example, then we won't really do anything. So there won't be any extra formatting printed at the end. So if we run this, now we get back the usual format. So London, Paris, New York, Utah, and Iceland, all on separate lines. And so it's because we've taken away this default function from the print function to print a new line at the end of every print statement. Yeah, so this is just one of those nice, neat little formatting things, but the reason we went into it here is just to illustrate that there are not any new lines being created or something using this for loop. It's really just that these new lines came from the print function rather than from this loop. But yeah, what we've seen here is that we've gone through the file line by line, and each line we've printed. And so, for example, if we were to take away this new line, and if we were to run it again, we would see what we saw in the beginning. We would see everything being printed on the same line. And so now there's only one line in the file because we didn't add any new lines. And so we print everything on one line. And if we add a space, for example, rather than a new line, we'll also print everything in one go. And just this time it's separated by spaces. So our for loop would actually go only once because there's only one line in the file. But yeah, we've got everything printed on here, like this. But let's just keep our new line here. Now, something else that we can do, for example, is we can read individual lines. So let's make a variable called first line, and let's make it equal to the first line of our file. So let's just read in the first line, and what we're going to do is we're going to make first line be equal to vacation file, and then we're going to do something to it. So we put a dot, and what we're going to do is we're going to read line, and then we open and close parentheses at the end. And then let's just print the first line. Yeah, and then let's run this code, and then let's see what happens. So what do we get? Well, we get, so we have our list here, and we open the file as writing, and we write all our spots to the file, so we do this every time. So effectively what we're doing every time is we're overwriting the file, but we don't really see it because none of our data changes. So we could technically take all of this out, and it wouldn't change anything because our file's already there. But what we're doing in our code every time is that we're opening the file from the beginning, and by using the write, we actually overwrite everything in it, but it all looks the same because we're just writing the same thing over and over again from the beginning. And so then we open our file that we created above as reading, and to read the first line, we just call the read line on our file, on our vacation file, and we save it in the first line. And then we print, and so we see London, and then we see this extra new line that came from this print statement. We can also take that away if we do something like this here, but we can see that it just comes from the print statement. And then what we do is we go through the file line by line. And now what we see is that we only print London once. And so what happens is that when we're inside the file, you can think of it kind of like a position pointer or something. And kind of similar to this blinking thing, it starts at the beginning of the file, and then every time you read something, it moves. And so when we read the first line, it moves, the position moves to the beginning of the second line. And so that's why here, now when we read the file, we start reading at the second line rather than the first line. So maybe we can also read the second line before to see this a little bit more. So then if we read the second line too, so we create a variable called second line, and we make it equal to vacation file, and from here we just read another line. And if we print the second line, let's just do this, and let's just see, and then and then we'll understand. So here we have London, which comes from, we read the first line in the vacation file, and then we print it out. And so we print London, and then we also get the extra new line from the print. And then now our pointer is pointing to the beginning of the second line. And then when we read line, we now don't read the first line, but we read the line that our pointer is pointing to. And so in this case, we read the second line. And so we save the second line in here. So the second line would be Paris. And we print that out, and which we see here, and then we get the extra new line from the print statement. And now when we go through the vacation file line by line, we start at the third line, because that's where our pointer is currently pointing to. And so then we get New York, Utah, and Iceland. But we don't ever repeat any lines, because our pointer moves with us as we read the file. Alright, so now we've seen the write and the read. One more thing that we may want to do is we may want to append. So maybe let's say we started off with these nice vacation spots, and then we did some research, and then we found another spot that we would really like. And so let's call that final spot, or we'll just create a variable called final spot, and that's where we're going to save the next spot in. And let's have this next spot be Thailand. So we'll save the word or the string Thailand in the variable final spot. And now let's open the vacation file. Again, so we've closed it up here, so that means we can use the variable again, and now we can open the file again. So we'll make the variable vacation file, and we'll have it be equal to, which we do through using the keyword open and close parentheses. Then we use the file name, which is vacation places, so the same as up here and up there. And now we put in the comma to indicate what we want to do, and what we want to do is we want to append to it. So that means we start writing at the end of the file. So we append to it, we write at the very end. And what we want to do is we just want to take vacation file and we want to write to it. So we put in the dot to indicate that we want to do something, and we type in what we want to do. We want to write. We open and close parentheses, and we put in the final spot that we want to write to, or that we want to write. And then let's just close our vacation file again. And let's run the code, and let's see what happens. Well, our output once again looks the same, and that's because there's no output from appending anything here. But now if we try to read the file again, so if we open the file again as reading this time, so we make the vacation file variable, and now we'll have it be open to vacation places. And this time we're going to read again, just like up here. And now let's just use the for loop to go through it line by line. So for line in vacation file, and let's just print the line, and then we'll add the end separator again. So we will just take the new line that comes from the print, and we'll just make it be equal to nothing. So we have end equal to this, and now all this does is that it just takes away the new line that's usually default with the print statement. So usually the print adds a new line after it's printed whatever, or after it puts out whatever happens. That's why we see the new lines here. But if we do this, then this extra line gets taken away, and so that's why there are no extra blank lines here, because we use this end and we redefined what should be done at the end of the print. And so at the end of the print, we don't add any extra formatting. So what are we really doing? Or what are we doing here before we run this code? We've created another variable, and in this variable, we saved the word or the string Thailand. And then what we've done is we've opened the file vacation places, which we closed up here. So we can open it again in a different format now. And this time we've opened the append format, and we saved it in the variable vacation file. And then to this vacation file, we write the content of final spot, which is just the word Thailand. So what we do is we write to the end of the file Thailand, and then we close the file again. So we close our vacation file, and now this time we open the file again, but we open it as reading. And so now now we can read through it, and we save it in the variable vacation file. And now again, this doesn't have to be called vacation file. These names here, they don't have to be the same. We just choose them to be the same because they're always applicable. But technically all these names could be different. This could be vacation file 2 or 3, or this could be a completely different name, like my first file, or here you could write a new file, or you can really do whatever you want, but we're just using the same name because it makes sense, because it's always the same file. So we'll just use the same name. Yeah, and so now that we've put it in reading mode, we're going to go through it line by line. using the for loop. So we're going to go through for line in vacation file, which lets us go through line by line, and then we're just going to print each line. And then what we need to do, or what we should do at the very end, is we should close our vacation file again, like this. So yeah, let's run the code, and let's see what we get. So first we'll get output from here again, and then we can compare it to the output from down here. So let's see what we get. Well, we get the same that we see up here. So we get London, which comes from reading the first line and saving it in the first line variable. Then we print it, and we print London, and we get the extra new line from the print statement. Then we read the second line because our pointer, after reading the first line, our current position is at the beginning of the second line. And so we read the second line and we save it in the variable called second line, and then we print it, and so we see Paris, and then we have this extra new line that just comes from the print statement. And then we go through vacation file line by line, and we just print the line. So we have New York after that, and Utah, and then Iceland. And then we close the file, and then we have we create a new variable called final spot, and we give it the value of the word Thailand, or the string Thailand. And then we open the file vacation places in append mode this time. So that's what A means, append mode. And we save it in the vacation file variable. And to this vacation file, we just write the content of final spot, which is Thailand. And then we close the file, and then we open the vacation places file again, but this time we open it in read mode, and we save it in the vacation file variable. And then we go through this line by line, and we just print the line. And so what we get is, we get London, which we see up here too. We get Paris, which we also see up here. We get New York, which we see here. Utah, just like before. Iceland, also just like before. But now we also see that we also have Thailand here. And this comes from the append. So what we've done is we've added Thailand to the end of our file. So what would happen, for example, if we made a little mistake and wrote or opened our file in writing mode rather than append mode? So let's just try it out and let's see what happens. So if we do that, then we get the same output from, so all this is the output from above. So we read the first line, we get London. We read the second line, we get Paris, and then we read the file line by line, and then we get New York, Utah, and Iceland. And then we close it, and then we open the file in write mode, and we write Thailand to it. And what it does, it completely overwrites everything in the file, and it writes Thailand to it. And then we close the file, and then we open it in reading mode, and we read it line by line. But since we've overwritten everything here, there's only one line to read, so we only get Thailand. So this is what could happen if you mistake read and append. It may not be that bad if we still have our writing up here. It may not be as great if you have the data from somewhere else and you've just overwritten everything. So this is something that you should also keep in mind, the difference between reading and writing and appending. So if we change this to append again, then we'll just, and if we run the code again, then we see that we've added Thailand to the end of the file again, rather than overwriting the whole file. So yeah. Now, there is another way to open a file, and let's just look at that too. And it has a certain advantage, and the certain advantage is that you don't always have to close the file at the end. It's done automatically for you, and so that may be nice for you. If you forget, like a lot of people always forget, I sometimes also often forget to close my file. So a foolproof way of doing that is to just open it a different way. And what you can do is you can use the with keyword. And so what this does, or let's just write it out and then let's explain. So what we can do is we can do with open, and then let's just open our vacation places in read mode. Vacation places in read mode, and then we write the keyword as, and then we can do vacation file. So that's where we want to save our vacation places in read mode in. And then we do a colon. So it's just like a for loop in some sense, the formatting. What this means is that we want to start whatever we do here, and then we make a new line, and then we see that it's indented here. So that means we're inside this with statement, and then we can do stuff to it. So we can also just read it again. So let's go make another for loop like we have up here, and let's just read it line by line. So we can do for line in vacation file, and let's just print the line, and let's leave out the change in the formatting just so that we can see the difference. And yeah, let's run the code, and then we can kind of understand what happened here. So let's run it first, let's see it, and then let's go through it and understand what we did here. So we see the London, Paris from above, New York, Utah, Iceland, and then we see the same thing repeated again, which happened after we append. And now, well, since we didn't add a new line to Thailand, London is actually written right behind Thailand. So the two are joined right now, and that's just because we didn't add any new line or something here. So we can fix that, for example, by just putting a new line here. And if we rerun our code, you see we get the same thing as above. So London, Paris, New York, Utah, Iceland from the first read, and then we append Thailand, and then we read it, and we get London, Paris, New York, Utah, Iceland, Thailand. And now we've added a new line to the end, and so now when we now we start reading from a new line again. And here we get London and then the new line. So all these extra spaces just come from the fact that our print has the extra formatting of adding a new line, and we've taken it away here just using this end keyword and changing the formatting to be nothing. And so that's why we don't have these extra spaces here. But we see here that we can read the file just like before. We get London, Paris, New York, Utah, Iceland, and Thailand. So we remember we appended Thailand to the end of the file, but we've done it in a different way. And the way we've done it is we've used the with keyword, or a with statement. And what we do is we with, and then we do something. And what we do is we open vacation places in reading mode. So it's just like up here, just like here. But rather than saving it in a variable, we open it in a temporary variable. So we do with, and then we do something, and so we open the vacation places in reading mode, and then we save it in vacation file. So with opening vacation places in reading mode as the vacation file, so it's pretty much saying that open vacation places in reading mode is saved in vacation file, and then we can treat vacation file just like we've treated it up here, as long as we stay within the indent of the with. And the nice thing about this is that we don't have to close the file in the end here. It gets closed automatically. So if I, for example, try to access vacation file here, so if I do vacation file dot read, for example, I'm going to get an error because vacation file is closed after I finish the with statement. So if I'm no longer in this indent, vacation file is going to be closed, and if I try to access it, it's going to give me an error. So if you run this, we'll see. What it tells us, it's IO operation on closed file, and so what the IO stands for is input output. So what it's saying is we want to do input or output, and so we want to do what we want to do is we want to read it. So it's the input, and so it's the input operation on a closed file. So that means vacation file is closed, but we've never closed it officially. But what the with statement does is that it closes it automatically for us as soon as we leave the with statement. So as soon as we leave this indent. And another nice thing that the with statement allows us to do is that we can add, that we can kind of do this with several variables. So what we can do here is, if we use a with statement, we can also add extra functions in here. So we could add, for example, an extra name. So if we put this inside a for loop, so if we do for I in range 5, so if we have, if we just use our temporary variable I and give it the values between 0 and 5, and we put all of this in a for loop, then what we can do here is we can do, well, we can add the string version or the word version of I. So our I is going to take on the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we can kind of dynamically change our file name. And so that's really nice, because we wouldn't be able to do that up here, but we can do it up here. We can just use different files the whole time. So first we'll open vacation places 0, then we would open vacation places 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and every time we leave this with statement, the file would just be nicely closed for us. And so this is another advantage that comes with this with statement. Yeah, but generally, reading and writing files is it's a really nice thing. It may take some getting used to. Sometimes the syntax may be a little bit weird or something, but yeah, it's really useful. It's really nice to be able to access files on your computer rather than having to copy out all the data or something, that you can just read it in line by line, or that you can write out to new files that, for example, if you have a lot of data that you create in a program and you want to save it for later, you can just write it out in a file. Yeah, so reading and writing from files is also something that you may use a lot later when you write your own programs and everything.